Okay, let's start coding our subject and observer example. And in this case, the subject is going to be a database in this example, just a sort of mock database, but it's going to allow you to edit records and delete records and so forth. And so various events can take place in the database, such as you edit a record, and the database, which is the subject in this example, should then notify all registered observers that something is going on in the database, such as you're editing a record. So here is the subject we're going to start with. Because everything takes place using Java methods, we're going to use interfaces to specify what methods the subject and observer have to implement. So here is the subject interface. It's going to have three methods. This is the database, as you remember. It's going to register observers. So whenever an observer wants to register with the database to be notified of events, it calls the register observer method. There's also going to be a remove observer method, which is called whenever an observer wants to be unregistered. And so the register observer method is going to add the observer object, which we'll create later, to an internal list, and the remove observer method is going to remove an observer from that list. And also you must notify the observers when an event has taken place with a notify observers method. So that is the interface for the subject, that is the database. Those three methods must be implemented by the database. We also have an observer interface. These are for all the interested observers that are watching the database. In this case, there's only going to be one method, the update method. This method is called whenever there is an operation performed on the database. For example, you might have an edit a record operation. So this update method will be called inside the observer with the operation name. In this case, it might be edit. It's going to be a string. And as well, the record number is going to be passed to the observer. And it's also going to be a string in this simple example. So for example, if you edit record number 1, then the operation will be edit. The record parameter will be record number 1. Okay, so let's start building our database. And here we have we're creating a database class. It implements the subject interface, which means that it's going to have to implement these three methods in order to work with observers. And we're going to store the observers in a one-dimensional array called a vector in Java, because the vectors have various methods that will be easy for us to manage the observers. So when the database is constructed, we're going to construct the new vector like this, the observers vector like that. And so that will give us the observers vector, which we can store registered observers in. Now we need to implement the register observers method, and that is pass an observer object. It's very simple to actually add that to our internal list of observers. You just use the observers vector add method, which is built into the Java vector object. So you just say observers.add and then add the observer to the observers vector that way. In addition, you need to implement the remove observer method. This removes an observer from the list of registered observers, and to do that, all you have to do is say observers, that's the observers vector, dot remove. It has a built-in remove method the vector class does in Java. Remove that is the observer that was passed to it. Finally, you have to edit. This is the way you're going to work with a database, edit record, delete, for example, record 1, and that is going to be how you work with the database example here. And so we're going to allow people to edit the database edit record method and pass the operation, which in this case is delete, and the record number, which in this case is record 1. And how we're going to handle that is we're going to store the operation in a private string. We're going to store the record number, private string as well. And we're going to notify observers. We're going to call the notify observers method. This notify observers method is going to loop over the entire number of registered observers. This is that for loop here. So you see here, it has a loop index, and it goes up to observers.size. That's the size of the number of observers that are registered with us. And you get the current observer using this expression, observers.get loop index. That get method returns the observer at the current loop index, and then you call the observer's update method, like this, passing it the operation and the record. So that is the notify observers method. As you see, it just loops over the registered observers, that's the observer's vector, gets every observer from the observer's vector, and calls that observer's update method in order to notify it that something has gone on. So next, we're going to create the observers themselves who are going to be registering with this database.